Alright, welcome to Josh's Recordings. It's been a long time since I posted, but I'm home now for a couple days, so let's get posting something, I guess. You know, there's money available, so, for these videos. Anyway, currently I'm at college, so that's the reason there's been a huge lack of videos, and I haven't had time to, dig around in this mess for a long time. I have a lot of things I could show you. I got these 3 CD player boomboxes that I never threw up there. This Bose sound system is for sale. Ignore that, including the stuff that's in that box. These, I blew the woofers on them. They were in an old video. One of them's gone completely. And I blew the woofer in this one, and so nothing really happened with that. I got this boombox, which is really cool, except that the coolest part of it doesn't work. CD player doesn't work. I tried to do a lot of adjustments on that, but I think the laser's gone bad. Also, this touch-sensitive automatic reverse cassette deck doesn't work, and the reverse lever's stuck, which seems to be a common problem with these. I got that TV that also has a dying picture tube where it's plugged in still for some reason, or it works if you give it a second to warm up. But yeah, you can see it's a little foggy and doesn't fill the screen all the way up, which kind of sucks. This is a really cool TV. It's also a little dim in person. It looks fine on camera, but in person it's a little dim. And see, that's with the picture all the way up. And you can try and mess around with it, but it doesn't really do much. So yeah, that TV, it's in need of help, unfortunately. The rest of the stuff is random crap in here. Now this is a junk room now. It's not even really. Oh yeah, I got this. I don't think I ever made a video on this. This is a realistic STA 2380, but none of those are the subject of today's video. What is this Sony STR DE335 home theater system. This one's complete. I don't usually get these things complete. I actually do have the center channel for it too. These speakers aren't hooked up. I know they work, but I didn't bother hooking them up. So basically, since it was Christmas a couple days ago, we, people got new stuff, and so their old stuff they're trying to get rid of it. Since the transfer station down back at the dump is getting very, they don't like people scavenging. So I have to resort to other ways of getting stuff to take videos of and sell. What I've been doing is this. I found on Facebook Marketplace. It was listed as old Sony surround system for free. And so I went and I messaged the guy and I was like, hey, do you still have that Sony surround system available? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, I can pick it up the next day if you're willing to give it up. And he was like, okay. He left it on the steps. It was there on the steps. I picked it up, threw it in the car, and took it back. But what I found was very interesting is this thing actually sounds a lot better than I was expecting it to. I wasn't expecting much from it, from these relatively cheap looking and sounding speakers. The main speakers don't look bad. They really don't. It does have a problem that a lot of these did have, and that is a lot of these speakers from this time period that Sony made have a problem where the tweeters like to burn out. And this one, the tweeter is blown. This one, it does work fully. And then, if you notice, there's a lot of wiring. The way that this thing's set up is, if you know anything about these older Sony audio-video control center receivers, they don't have a dedicated subwoofer output. So, the way that this subwoofer works is, it is this kind. It's a passive subwoofer. And it is wired in like this, and I know this is very messy wiring. It's just the only wires I had on hand. You have an input and you have an output, and you wire it in parallel with your main speakers, running it through the input through the output. And as you can see, it's just a normal speaker. It's just rated for 100 watts maximum input power. Chinese, but what can you do? So I was like, this thing's probably not gonna sound that great, but I might be able to get about $100 for it as a complete kit. But then I hooked it up, and please excuse, this laptop has an absolutely terrible sound card. But let's try and find something. relatively appropriate to play. This song has some pretty good bass, so we'll play that. You're gonna have to excuse the laptop's absolutely terrible sound card, but also you can tell this thing's kind of old. If you look, the volume control is the regular turn to each side type. There's no, it's not a rotary encoder. It's actually a potentiometer, and then you have your bass balance and your treble controls, which are all potentiometers. We'll turn it on. We have DVD, which is kind of funny because there's nothing on here that says DVD. Oh, this also has a problem that a lot of Sonys have, where some buttons don't work. Bass boost, I can't turn bass boost off because it goes to muting. There we go. So, it has that problem. But, yeah, so it does work. Let's fast forward into this. So as you can see, if I try not to get copyright tagged, so I actually do make a little bit of money off this video, it does have really, really good bass, and I was very, very surprised about that, especially because bass boost on, but the bass controls is neutral out, and this laptop has freaking terrible sound card, but overloading it a little bit there. But it has decent sound for what it is, and so I was really curious about that because these speakers weigh nothing. They're really, really light, and so I was really curious about how this thing was set up. And the way this thing works is, you notice how there's no speakers on this. When I turned it around, you can't actually see any, like that. You can't see any speakers on it. So I was wondering how this thing's set up. It's actually set up as a 4th order bandpass box, which is quite advanced for a subwoofer, especially a passive subwoofer. But it seems like they could do that cheaper than making a separate amp for it, and it works. The main problem with it is that it doesn't have very, very good dynamics, because it is only 100 watts, and you're using the same power to power this subwoofer as you are powering the main speakers. Which, I mean, it works all right. It sounds really good for what it is, especially if you don't have songs with this much bass in them. If we play like a more, actually, we'll play something from this. Here we go. Play something that has a little bit more regular detail in it. Tweeter is blown in this channel, so that's kind of sad. But yeah, I can't play much of that because YouTube is going insane with demonetizing videos. But let's take a look inside these speakers. So I'm gonna put you on pause because I got my Samsung phone back. Oh yeah, I used to have a Razr. You probably wasn't a couple of my videos. I used to have a Razr phone. I dropped that while I was at college, and down 3 flights of stairs, and it still works. It's just the camera module fell out, so I got a Samsung back. So we're back to using a Samsung. But let's pop the back of this off, and you can see how this is set up. All right, I popped the back off, and you can just see the lack of quality that this thing has. It's really thin wood. But here's how the brains of this, which it's not really brains, it's just completely passive logic, where just a crossover. I'm not totally sure what type of crossover. One of people that are more smart than I am can tell me what kind of crossover this is, but basically it just crosses over at, say, like 120 hertz. I'm not totally sure what the actual frequency is, but let's say 120 hertz. And then we got our 2 speakers in here, which are very tiny for subwoofer drivers. I'll pop one of them out too, if you give me a second, and you can see how tiny they actually are. And then you can take a look at the front of this box. As you can see, this piece of wood is mounted in the middle of the box. In the front, we have a bass reflex design. In the back, it's a sealed enclosure. And that's the way that this thing is able to get decent bass out of those tiny little speaker drivers. Let's take a look. Let's see what it sounds like with just the bass reflex working. Interesting. So it seems like the mid-range output from the subwoofer is much higher with the back removed, and that's probably what this second enclosure is really for, is to dampen that mid-range output. And these speakers, they move quite freely, which gives me the idea that they're probably relatively sensitive little drivers. Let's take this further apart. So as I was saying, very tiny little drivers in here, and we can see how much these little things move. If we click the our music back on. So not as much as you'd expect. So very interesting how this thing is set up. And if we take a look deep in here, we can see that it's literally just a cabinet in there, and the speakers themselves mount up to that, and they will play into that cabinet. So you have your boomy part of the speaker and this part of the speaker that kind of dampens the back wave is what I'm gonna say that does, because it's, it's a fourth order bandpass. So, but I'll throw this thing back together and we'll take a look inside the main speakers. Alright, that's back together, and I really do enjoy the way this subwoofer sounds, just because all it really does is add to the low frequency extension of the main speakers. Instead of... So, I find that personally pretty cool. That's all it really does. It's not incredibly overpowering, which is neat. So let's take a look inside of the main speakers. So here's what we have. We have the main speaker, and it's cheap. I mean, it's not a bad driver. I'm honestly kind of surprised. It says they're magnetically shielded on the back. Yeah, right. There's no magnetic shielding at all on these. It has a relatively decent amount of weight to it. I'm actually not going to complain. It has decent excursion, and it's a plastic cone, similar to what you'd see in a car audio speaker. So it's kind of a car audio grade sound system. That's really what it looks like to me. But it has decent excursion, and it's a decent little speaker. The tweeter, on the other hand, yeah. Magnets on there really sloppy. It's not bad. If only it, actually worked. Then for the box, it's thin. It's nothing incredible. For the inside, we do have a tiny little bit of polyfill, so they didn't completely skimp out. For the crossover, you can see there's no actual crossover in the box. The crossover for the tweeter is just this little thing right here, which is probably more of why it blew, because a 1.8 microfarad 100 volt capacitor ain't gonna do a whole lot for a sensitive tweeter, which we all know these Sony systems really did for back in the day. But yeah, this woofer, I'm not gonna shame this thing too much. This thing is pretty well built. So that's cool. Let's get these back apart, and we'll take a look inside of the receiver. So we'll start with the surround, and undoubtedly what the center speaker looks like. It's a very simple little, honestly not a bad looking driver. I have doubts it can handle 80 watts like the back panel says it can, but who am I to judge? As for the wiring, it just goes straight back. No crossover, nothing. No filling material in these boxes. Completely empty. They are ported, which I was surprised about. So when the little speaker driver is actually in there, it looks like a little subwoofer, which is kind of funny. As for the receiver, let's see what we got in here. Pretty typical for Sony construction from this time period. We have a couple chips down here. that are Sony branded. That's pretty cool. And then the main amplifying capacitors are SK, STK, whatever you like to say. I used to call them STK, but I'm pretty sure they're SK. MN2488 and NP1620, which, you know, are NPN, PNP transistors. This thing is made with a little bit of quality. Check out these caps. Nichicon capacitors. That's surprising. And yeah, this I mean, it's built down to a price, like, you know, but it still has a protection relay. The main panel, it's a little cheap, little chintzy, but you know, it'll do. Wiring is shielded to the main board, so props there. It's not too terrible in there, honestly. It's a cheap little receiver, but it definitely gets the job done. So that's all you can really ask for. As for these speakers back in the day, if you did anything with older surround sound, let's see if I can get these on with one hand. Man, that little tiny one. If you ever did anything with older surround sound, you will know that these older speakers, these older surround speakers, were built down. That they weren't built incredibly to be incredible speakers. The older surround speakers were only used for rear effect. They weren't used for anything else, especially if you looked into older Dolby codecs. They were only used to add effect. They were never used as a main channel like they are today with a lot of, you know, Dolby Atmos and modern home theater. These were only used for extra added effect. And a lot of times the main speakers were made to handle all the bass. There were no subwoofers, and a lot of these 90s type stuff. This one's from the early 2000s, so it adds the passive subwoofer. But a lot of these systems back in the day didn't even add a subwoofer on until, you know, the mid 2000s, when subwoofers started to be like, hey, we can make all the main speakers really tiny and add a subwoofer that plays up to 200 hertz, and that'll be perfect. But you know. This is not a bad little receiver. At some point in time, I'm probably going to sell the receiver. I might keep this setup because I honestly kind of like the way this sounds with these speakers. I would like to get a tweeter for that one, though, because, you know, that tweeter's blown. We might hook it up to this amp at some point in time and see what it sounds like. But yeah, it's not a bad little system, especially for free. So, thanks for watching. Josh's Recordings.